challenge of chapter 3 left us with the position of, do you have what it takes to be a Chabadnik? And to answer your question, Sherry, every one of us has these tools. And you don't have to speak about people that are mentally limited. You can speak about ordinary people that never really reach their capacity. Don't worry about the exceptions. The people that don't have what it takes to ever really, maybe mentally retarded people. Don't worry about them for now. Let's talk about us. And are we at 4% or 3% of our mental capacity? Let's try to push that to 5 or 6% or 10 or 12%. And a little meditation can go a very long way. At least we know what the tools are. So let's say, an example, you hear a good sermon or something. If you hear a good... So for example, we spoke this past Shabbos. The theme of the sermon was that the way you judge other people is exactly how you will be judged. Is exactly how you will be judged. Right? So whilst you're judging other people, your sentence is being written. How you treat... what the word you say about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton, for whatever indiscretion you don't like, is exactly... Or how you react to your son-in-law for whatever he did. If you have some sort of an indiscretion in your own life, which is known or unknown, it doesn't matter. But in heaven, one day when you get there, they're going to say, okay, we know how to rule here because you've already stated the verdict. So that's a nice nugget of wisdom right there. But can you apply that to your daily routine experience? Can you watch your mouth before you speak, before you pass judgment about a fellow human being? That would be a das moment.
It's like they have to bite your tongue.
You gotta bite your tongue?
Time.
You gotta bite your tongue. So that would be a das experience, a knowledge experience. That would be living with knowledge. And that's why it's so interesting. Now, what's a human being called? A human being in Torah is called a Bal Da'at. Bal Da'at. A possessor of Da'at. The one thing that animals don't have is awareness. Self-awareness. What happened to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden? What was the tree that they weren't supposed to be eating from? The tree of Eitz HaDa'at, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because they had this objective, non-commitmental relationship with good and with bad. The moment that they ate from the tree of knowledge, they now became subjective. Everything became aware, and that's why their first reaction was what? To cover their nakedness, because they right away were aware of their own shame. Before that, they had no shame. Any animal, gorillas walk around naked. All animals walk around naked. They're not aware. They don't have awareness. They don't have a sense of shame. It's a wonderful existence. Babies don't have a sense of awareness either. But as you mature, you become a Bal Da'at. The question is if you're able to live a proactive, intellectual day or a reactive day, where you're responding to external stimuli, or you are thinking, you're applying and downloading wisdom to your own personal life to become a more meaningful and happier person, rather than just reacting to the stock market or reacting to CNN and reacting to whichever hurricane is headed here, right? You're just reacting all day. Or are you generating and guiding your own path? So that's chapter 3. Very, very powerful stuff. Which leads us into chapter 4. Chapter 4 does not discuss the emotions. Touches on it. But what it does discuss is the 3 garments of the soul. Remember, we're under the hood here, right? So we've got the garments of the soul. What are the garments of the soul? What are the garments of the soul? You have 3.
No, I just wondered my son's around.
Does he have white hair?
Yeah.
Is that your son?
Yeah, Mark, we stopped
it's your
here
son.
on the way
Yeah.
so I can come to class.
I thought it's your son. Good, okay. So there's 3. The soul is very nice. Very nice to have a soul. And it's very nice to have a soul with 3 intellectual attributes and 7 emotional attributes. I guess we don't really need much explanation to explain what anger is, or what pity is, or what compassion is, or what kindness is. We know that intimately. The question is, how does a spiritual soul engage in a world that's physical? It's like Windows 7. You go to Windows 7, right? Do you know what Windows 7 is?
You don't want me to, but I do.
Whatever the newest Windows is, XP, HP, whatever it's called.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Windows HP, whatever it's called, right? How are you going to download it? It's actually interesting. We're actually upgrading the video audio here at the show as we speak with this electrician, to the point that someone like this Tanya class is, and every other class we do here, is going to have wireless microphones for any events, and also live video recording. So someone like Elaine Collins, who's not here today, if she wants to, can participate in the class but via live video feed. We're installing live video cameras that are, Sarah gives a class to the ladies that Chabad.org wants to broadcast.
Right.
So we're installing these cameras so her class can be live broadcast.
So it can be live streaming.
Right, live streaming. So people in New Zealand can log in and text
Love
their
that.
questions,
Yeah,
right?
that's great.
So it's very interesting. So we had a whole discussion today about how we can capture the video and what we can do with it, where we can place it, and which website can you put it on Facebook. How do we take this spiritual file? Where does it go? Does it go to my email? Does it go to where is it? How do we find it? There's an IP address. What's an IP address? And eventually we discussed about where this thing lands up and how we're going to take it from wherever it lands up and put it somewhere else. So you need an interface. You can have a tool, but if you aren't able to interface with the tool, it's not very helpful. So there could be an angel in this room right now. Imagine the angel Gabriel's in this room. I can't touch him. I can't see him. I can't smell him. I can't taste him, and I can't feel him. So it doesn't help much. There's no way for me to engage with the angel Gabriel. There's radio waves in this room right now as well. I can't engage with them. There's no interface. But if I had a radio, I could turn on the radio and I'd interface. I'd capture. So in the same way that a radio captures radio waves, in the same way that a cell phone captures cell phone waves, so too soul energy has only got 3 platforms of engagement. There's only 3 ways that our intellect and emotion, our 10 windows, are able to ever pop through the portal of spiritual into physical. It's a portal. Like the radio waves goes through a portal. How does the soul energy express itself in this world? Okay, I'm angry now. I'm angry. So how am I going to express anger?
Speech.
Speech, action, or thought. Thought, speech, and action. That's it. Thought, speech, and action are the only platforms of expression. Let's talk about Facebook for a moment. So I can get Facebook on my phone. I can get Facebook on my desktop. I can get Facebook on my iPad. Can I get Facebook on the Beamer? Answer is no. Can I get Facebook on in my car? That's no. I can't get Facebook in my car.
Maybe not your car.
Yeah, maybe not my car. And if you have an iPad in your car, then maybe you can.
No, I can't. But
There are Apple cars now.
yeah.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
gosh.
There are systems in cars that you can get that.
So, but you realize that Facebook has got
It's another reason to take your eye off the road.
Yeah.
right. So Facebook has got it's critical when you're on the I-95. You have to know who just had a baby, right? Very important piece of information.
I mean, these are all distractions while you're driving.
Of course.
It's
So,
horrible.
so you realize that Facebook has got these 3 platforms. At least in my life, it's mobile, iPad, and desktop.
Excuse me.
That's it. There's only 3 forms of expression. There is no other form of engagement. And those are the forms of engagement. In chapter 9, we're going to learn that the 2 souls are in an epic tug of war.
That's what you were saying.
An epic tug of war that they're constantly fighting over. They're like 2 kings fighting over dominion over the city. What is the city? The city is speech. The city is thought, and the city is action. Right now, we're all sitting around this table. I'm doing talking. You're doing thinking. So your thoughts are engaged in holiness. My speech is engaged in holiness, as opposed to speaking slander. We could be speaking slander right now about who knows, right? We could be. And the evil inclination, the animal soul inside of us, is getting all nervous right now. Not too much Torah study here. We've got to balance this out. Even Stephen, I want to make sure that, We can stick some slander in here a little later to make sure we don't get too holy. He's feeling a little left out. Because right now dominion goes to the godly soul. They're fighting over these three prizes. And these are called the garments of the soul. When the person is engaged in Torah study intellectually, and he's speaking Torah study, and he's doing the mitzvahs, then an amazing thing happens. At this moment, an amazing thing happens. At this moment, what's happening is that God's wisdom, which is Torah, is what we are engaging in, right? We are engaging in God's wisdom right now. We're learning wisdom. Tanya is Jewish wisdom, Torah. So by us learning Torah, we're doing something that we never have been able to do before. What is that? We learned in chapter 2 from the Zohar that God is unknowable in the way that we know. Your thoughts are not my thoughts. Your wisdom is not my wisdom. Why? Because we and our wisdom are completely separate. There's Salzer, the guy that invented the polio vaccine. Salk and the polio vaccine are completely separate. There's him and the polio vaccine, and they have nothing to do one with another. He did discover it, but they're completely independent, one of the other. God and his wisdom are one and the same. Can't wrap our minds around that concept, which is why God says, don't even try. My wisdom is not your wisdom. My thoughts are not your thoughts. But God and his wisdom are one. So his wisdom is him. What are we doing right now? We're capturing his wisdom. By us capturing God's wisdom right now, what we're effectively doing is that for the first time, we're actually capturing God's essence at this moment right now. The platform of wisdom is the platform of thought is allowing us to grasp God's wisdom, Torah, which is God's essence. And that's why normally, what's more special, the person or the clothing the person is wearing?
The person.
Yeah, of course the person is more important than clothing. But clothing has an extraordinary quality. That clothing, what has to go? Clothing maketh the man, is that what they say?
Yeah.
Clothing maketh the man.
Gives you a perception of a person, I think.
Shoes take away the blues, right? So,
Is that what Khanda tells you?
something like that, yeah. Shoes take away the blues. So,
Her shoes definitely take away the
how you're dressed is how people perceive you and how you perceive yourself. If you're dressed for success, you don't have holes in your socks, right? Because if you have holes in your socks,
Is that
you're in the
where
frame of
tznius
mind.
comes in then too?
Of course,
Definitely, right?
tznius, modesty is about self-esteem and self-image. Who am I? If the only way I can attract attention is by drawing attention to my anatomy, then there's not much to me, quite frankly, right? And there's a certain dignity. You won't find Princess Kate walking around like that, or Queen Elizabeth. They don't do that because they're regal. When you're dressed regal, you feel regal. When you're dressed, in shorts, then you feel different.
I disagree.
And let me just finish this point before you disagree. The point I'm making is that clothing has the extraordinary ability to elevate or downgrade a person, where you can feel much better or much worse, depending on what you're wearing. And that's what the soul's garments are doing to the soul. They're actually taking the soul to a place that the soul couldn't reach on its own, which is intimacy with God.
Is that why typically all Jewish people are buried in a shroud, so that everyone is alike?
It's connected to the fact that burial is a recognition of true value and identity, and there's no betrayals. The word for clothing is actually beged, which also means boged, which means a traitor. The clothing betrays your true identity. Wow. That you are someone who you're not really. It takes you where you're really not. And when you're going to face your maker, nobody cares how much you have in the bank or which car you drive.
Right.
It's about simplicity and who you really are, yeah. So which point do you disagree with?
No matter what you wear, you are who you are. And it is, you wear your clothes the way you are. Whether you're wearing shorts or an evening gown for a woman or
You don't feel
simple-
different in an evening gown as opposed to a bikini?
See,
Well, there's a feeling of relaxation or a regalness or the way you dress. I mean, certainly I feel different in an evening gown than I do in shorts, but I don't feel less of a person or more of a person.
Less of a person or more of a person?
I am who I am.
How would you feel if you went to a wedding in shorts?
It's not appropriate.
How would you feel? Would you just say, I am who I am. I don't care.
No.
That is what it is.
I
Or would
guess
you
I'm
leave?
not. I guess I'm not.
Would you leave?
No, of course not.
You would not leave.
No.
You would stick around in shorts.
If I went to a wedding in shorts,
Yeah.
I wouldn't go to a wedding in shorts.
Well, imagine you went and you didn't realize.
I can't imagine that. I'll give you another example. I was at dinner last night, and there was a woman there who was not having a good night, and she was screaming at the top of her lungs in a dining room and saying some very ugly things. And everyone in this room was embarrassed, and this woman was dressed to the hilt. But, you know, what did anybody do? Nobody except the manager of the dining room spoke to her. Nobody got up and walked out, and she wasn't asked to leave.
What would have happened if she was dressed in rags?
Then-
Would have thrown her out.
Yeah.
I don't think
Okay.
so.
But she was dressed elegantly, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
She was dressed nicely.
But
It
that's
was a
not who
private
she
club.
was.
It was a private club. It was, and she could have come in dressed in shorts or whatever. I mean.
Look, even if you disagree with me about your perception of yourself, certainly other people will judge you by the way you dress.
Can I say something too?
Yeah.
Because I've been on both ends of the spectrum, okay? When I was not religious, I dressed so slutty, immodestly. I mean, you know, minis and cut out and everything like that. And when I look back now, how I dressed back then, it embarrasses me. Because what I thought, in my head, I thought, this is how I'm gonna attract people, guys or whatever, by doing it. And I remember my cousin, who's a rabbi, said, Corey, you know, it's none of their business. It's no one's business what you look like underneath. That's what he goes. It's no one's business. Just
personal.
That's me. Huh?
Too personal.
Yeah, and I
TMI.
look back and I'm absolutely mortified. Yeah, I was very young, but still.
Let's take a look at the Tanya itself. Let's look at the text itself. You ready? So we're going to turn to page 13. And by the way, Lois, it's your first time here. I want you to know that I don't want you necessarily to agree with me. Don't feel obligated to agree with me.
Oh, you know I won't.
Good.
And I
Don't feel obligated. On the contrary, it makes it more interesting when you don't agree. Because
But are you saying that if somebody's dressed elegantly, does not mean they're an elegant person?
when they're not dressed elegantly,
When they are, like that woman. She was dressed elegantly, right?
She was just, it was just a dining room, a club dining room. and
Okay.
She was dressed nicely, but
But she wasn't a nice
but she wasn't a
person.
nice person.
Okay.
So,
Sometimes they don't match, the
Right.
inside and the outside.
Yeah.
oftentimes they don't match.
right.
Yeah.
But
So-
I guess my point was, we try, I don't know how to express my point. We try to be, at least in this environment, we try to be our real selves. We don't put on any airs. We are who we are. Doesn't matter what our clothes are. We have people here.
You mean at the show?
Yes, we have people here who dress from in every
Yeah, we
spectrum.
try very hard not to judge people by
Yes.
the covers.
Exactly.
Definitely.
and everybody is accepted for the person they are, not the clothes.
Right,
they
that's a
wear.
valid point. Let's look at it in the text itself. Let's see how it comes out, right? So I'm going to start chapter 4. I'm not sure if I'm going to finish it, but we'll see where this goes, okay? In addition to the three intellectual capacities, the 3 intellectual windows of the 10 windows of expression, every divine soul, godly in nefesh elokit, possesses 3 garments, viz., thought, speech, and action, expressing themselves in the 613 commandments of the Torah. For when a person actively fulfills all the precepts which require physical action, and with his power of speech he occupies himself in expounding all the 613 commandments and their practical application, and with his power of thought he comprehends all that is comprehensible to him in the pardes of the Torah. The pardes is the 4 levels of interpretation of Torah, which is literal, esoteric, homiletic, and Kabbalistic. 4 levels of interpretation. So in other words, he's fully engaged in the entirety of Torah. He's thinking Torah wisdom, he's speaking Torah wisdom, and he's doing mitzvahs, commandments. Then the totality of the 613 organs of his soul are clothed in the 613 commandments of the Torah. Just a quick note here. So you know the 613 commandments in the Torah. We have 613 limbs in our bodies. Did you know that? 248 limbs and 365 veins and sinews. Obviously limbs doesn't mean arms and legs. It's other calculation. 248 limbs and 365 veins and sinews, a total of 613. Also our soul has 613 organs.
Our soul?
Our souls. Not physical organs, but 613 components. And each mitzvah needs to be fulfilled by every single soul. You may have heard me in the reincarnation class to talk about how the purpose of reincarnation is in order for the soul to fulfill all 613 commandments. Because when the soul completes the 613 commandments, it's then that all the 613 components of the soul are clothed or dressed. When you do the mitzvah with thought, speech, or action, you're dressing yourself for what? For the big wedding. What's the big wedding? Is Gan Eden. Is up in heaven when, with the arrival of Mashiach, where Hashem godliness is revealed. And the way I've explained it in the reincarnation seminar is that just like when you go to the beach and you're exposed to the rays of the sun, the powerful rays of the sun, you need to protect yourself with the suntan lotion, otherwise you'll burn. So too, when godliness is revealed to our souls, it's too powerful. And the soul will recoil, will burn. That's why the soul needs protection of the garment, which the garments are the 613 commandments. When each soul, through the various reincarnation cycles, fulfills all 613 commandments and now is ready to proceed to that revelation stage without getting damaged.
But you say
If the
that
613 commandments have not yet been fulfilled, the soul needs to come back and reincarnate.
So you're reincarnating into another person?
Yeah, to come back to this world in order to be able to have the opportunity, sometimes as a dog, in order to fulfill and finish your soul's mission in this world, depending on what the remainder of the mission is.
But you say that the soul was in Eden before coming for the reason
Yeah,
they want to come.
but just like the roller coaster goes down, in order to get a stronger elevation, you go down in order to go ever higher. So too, when the soul comes down to this world, if the purpose of the descent was in order to reach the same place that it came from, that would be pointless.
I know.
It goes down in order to reach much higher.
But it was the dress there to be there, and then what? When it went down, get undressed with the commandments? Or
Yeah, it was naked. We're born naked.
and then
Yeah.
has to dress again.
And now when you dress, see, this to me is the extraordinary gift of chapter 4, which is telling us that only in this world are we given the opportunity to be able to engage with God's essence. Up in heaven, you're not able to engage in God's essence. You have your little suite in the hotel, and that's it. Let's say you have a suite in London. I have an apartment in London, but that's not Buckingham Palace. I'm not in the palace. Obviously, I'm using the Queen as, an analogy here. But I have an apartment in London, very nice. But I was sent from London to Uzbekistan in order to do a certain mission for the Queen, and there is where I'm able to capture the Queen's essence in Uzbekistan. So when I return, now I'm in the King's private chamber.
And what if God judges us harshly?
But once just before that question, I want to make sure that I explain that the way that we can engage with God's essence in this world is through what? Mitzvot and Torah. Because Torah, and we'll learn more about this in the next chapter, but Torah in this chapter is what's discussed, is God's wisdom, and God and His wisdom are actually one. They're one and the same. You can't do Torah up in heaven. It's only in this world that you're able to engage in Torah. It's only in this world that you're able to engage in God's essence.
Which is why on the Yort site, the whole idea is to elevate the soul of the one that's not living anymore.
How do you do that? Through Torah,
Through Torah.
and mitzvahs, right? You're sending them the care package. So it's only in this world that you're able to engage in God's essence by engaging in Torah study, which connects you with God's essence. You can't do that when you're up in heaven. And that's why when you go back to heaven, you're going much, 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 much higher than wherever you started at the beginning. What were you saying, Sally?
What if God, after death, judges us harshly? The way we've judged others is what you said before.
Okay, so what's the
What are
problem?
the consequences of that?
That's not good.
What?
That's not good.
You know what? You know
If
the
you judged
consequence?
others harshly, then God is going to be unforgiving with you.
And what does that mean?
It doesn't give you the benefit of the doubt.
You stay in limbo.
In this, well, I don't know if it means you stay in limbo, but it just means that you better be on your best behavior, because if you weren't, I don't know what's going to happen.
And there's always time for teshuva, by the way,
As long as you're living.
as long as you're living, repentance. I mean, changing our ways. We can always.
In other words,
change
what
our ways.
exactly that means, I don't know.
Okay. That's
If I was God, I'd know, but I'm not, so I don't know exactly what that means. So, but generally speaking, if you're rough on other people, then, they'll be rough on you too, because you're writing your own verdict. Right? So let's go just a little bit further. Specifically, the faculties of Chabad, Chachma, Bina, Dat, and His soul, are clothed in the comprehension of the Torah, which he comprehends in Pardes, which is the 4 levels of interpretation, to the extent of his mental capacity, Shari. To your mental capacity. And not everybody has the same mental capacity. You've got to do your share, and she's going to do her share, and he's going to do his share. Don't worry about being Abraham. Just worry about being Shari. Everyone according to his level. And the supernal root of his soul. And the midot, the emotions, namely fear and love, together with their offshoots and ramifications. Remember, we said last week that the 7 emotions are really founded upon fear and love, chesed and gevura. Everything else are offshoots. They are clothed in the fulfillment of the commandments in deed and in word. We connect with, through thinking Torah, we're connecting with through thinking Torah, the Chabad component, the intellect component of our soul is connected with God. That makes sense, right? Because intellect is thinking Torah. But through doing the mitzvahs, this might be a little difficult to relate to. Through doing the mitzvahs, our emotions, the emotions of our soul, are connected with God. Why is that? Why is it? Sorry. Why is it that when we do the sorry. Why is it that when we do
water?
Oh, can you use a little bit of water, please? Thank you. Why is it that when we do the mitzvahs, we are connecting the emotions of our soul with God? The reason is because you can't ever really do something adequately unless you're fueled by an emotion of love or fear. If you're not fueled by an emotion, for example, imagine you have a job and you have no emotion related to the job. You hate your job. Could you really do anything?
You don't do a very good job, probably.
Right. You want to do something that you feel for. When you have an emotion, that's when your actions, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Rabbi, while you're drinking, so prayer has nothing to do with it? The study of Torah and prayer? Are they
Prayer is a mitzvah.
synonymous? Or
Prayer
they-
is a mitzvah. Torah is Torah. We're talking about Torah and mitzvahs. So, just to conclude, the no action can ever be justified, can ever be executed without being fueled by an emotion of either love or fear. Because remember, all 7 emotions are founded upon these 2 emotions. If I love it, or if I have a negative feeling, like a fear, an awe, then it's going to guide my job. I remember talking to a valet guy once, and I asked him if he likes his job. He says, no. I said, why not? He says, because if I liked it, then it wouldn't be a job. I felt very bad for him. Because you should love your job. Mm-hmm. If you don't love your job, you can't really do it properly. You're going to be miserable. So, what I'm saying effectively is that when we're doing the deed, the 3 platforms, remember, are thought, speech, and action. When our soul is engaged in the action of the mitzvahs and the speech of the mitzvahs, that is connecting the emotional component of our soul with God. With the mitzvah is God's will. When we're thinking Torah, we're connecting the intellectual component of our soul with God's will, with God's wisdom, which is the Torah. So, in other words, what this is saying is that by using our garments for holy purposes, thought, speech, and action, thought to speak Torah, thought to think Torah, speech to talk about godly wisdom or mitzvahs, and action to do the mitzvahs, we are connecting the entirety of our soul with God's essence. And that's something which we couldn't ordinarily achieve on our own. The equivalent, one second. And the midot, I'm going back just a few lines. And the midot, I'm going to wrap up over here. Namely, fear and love, together with their offshoots and ramifications, are clothed in the fulfillment of the commandments in deed and in word, namely in the study of Torah, which is the equivalent of all the commandments. Why is it that the emotion is connected with the actions of the commandments? For love is the root of all the 248 commands, all originating in it and having no true foundation without it. If you don't have love of God, then you can't truly fulfill the positive commandments, inasmuch as he who fulfills them in truth truly loves the name of God and desires to cleave to him in truth. For one cannot truly cleave to him except through the fulfillment of the 248 commandments, which are the 248 organs of the king, as it were, as is explained elsewhere. So love is the prime motivator of the fulfillment of the positive commandments, whilst fear is the root of the 365 prohibitive commandments, fearing to rebel against the Supreme King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, or a still deeper fear than this when he feels ashamed in the presence of the divine greatness, to rebel against his glory and do what is evil in his eyes, namely any of the abominable things hated by God, which are the klipot and sitra achra, which draw their nurture from man below and have their hold in him through the 365 prohibitive commandments that he violates. If you don't have an awe, a fear of God, you'll never really be able to abstain from violating the prohibitions. If you're not afraid to violate God, then you won't really be able to abstain from the prohibitions. But if you have a proper fear, then you will be able to control yourself.
Just so you know how I'm sorry.
In other words, I'm going to finish the point. In other words, it's the emotions of fear and love that motivate the fulfillment of the commandments, and therefore, when we fulfill the commandments with the platform of action and the platform of speech, as in prayer, the emotional component, the 7 attributes, are connecting with God. When you are thinking Torah, you are connecting the 3 intellectual components of your soul with God. And just to conclude, now these 3 garments deriving from the Torah and its commandments, although they are only called garments of the soul, of nefesh, ruach, and neshama, their quality nevertheless is infinitely higher and greater than that of the nefesh, ruach, and neshama themselves, as explained in the Zohar, because the Torah and the Holy One, blessed be He, are one. God and the Torah are one. And the only way we can connect to Torah is through thought. There's no other way we can connect to Torah. So that's why the garment is very, very powerful. The meaning of this is that the Torah, which is the wisdom and the will of God, blessed be He, and His glorious essence are one, since He is both the knower and the knowledge. I guess I'm going to stop over here. What? So in other words, where this is going, I'm going to stop over here. We're over time, but basically what it's saying is, where we're headed here, is that God and His wisdom are one. Our only way to connect to drop an anchor and connect to God's essence is through Torah. How do we connect to Torah? Only through thought. That's why the garment is extremely important, powerful, pivotal, to be able to lead us to our destiny and to our purpose.
Well, I thought the action, though, the actual doing of the mitzvah, is that less important than the thought of Torah?
Look, it depends on the perspective. On Tanya, there's different perspectives in the 30s and in these chapters about the benefits of Torah versus mitzvah, and then there's the benefit of mitzvah
Really?
over Torah. Yeah,
Wow.
there are extraordinary benefits for each. So we'll be learning about that in this and the
I
next
thought
chapter.
that was one thing, Torah and mitzvah.
Look, it might be a little esoteric. I'm not sure I spent a lot of time on a review here today, but the point we're developing here is the extraordinary ability to be able to connect to God's essence only in this world, something which you couldn't do anywhere else, and only as long as you're alive, you're able to connect to infinity. Nowhere else can you connect to infinity. You imagine you want to get a blazing fast internet. You want to get internet that's 1 million bits per second. Can't do it. Sorry, you can't do it. But if you go to a certain place, I don't know, there's maybe the undeveloped countries where Google is sending out a blimp, or they're from satellite, they're sending in internet to everybody. Then over there, everybody has blazing fast internet. In other words, by descending to this world, we're actually experiencing the portal to infinity, where nowhere else we're able to experience that. And that's why we have to celebrate and cherish every moment in this world, where we wouldn't be able to have this opportunity elsewhere. Against your will, you're born. As we spoke in chapter 2, the soul is a piece of God. But at the same time, against your will, you die, recognizing that we don't want to leave this world. This is extraordinary.
Wow.
Okay, any questions?